Hey, I'm Freddy Hall, and welcome to the season finale of Into the Unknown. Today, we'll be talking to Diaz de Villegas and Regan McCarthy. Rob is always out in the woods with his content, and Regan has a degree in folklore, and they are WFSU's very own. So both of them today will help me walk into the unknown and uncover what's going on out there. Welcome to the season finale of Into the Unknown. I'm your host, Freddy Hall, and today we're bringing together two of WFSU's own explorers of story and mystery. Joining me is Diaz de Villegas, producer and host of WFSU's ecology podcast, Coast to Canopy, where he uncovers the wild connections that shape Florida's natural world. Also with us is Regan McCarthy. She's the WFSU's interim news director and folklorist with a master's degree in folklore studies.
Oh, you just really upgraded me. No masters, but we can pretend for today.
Okay. So together we're diving into Florida's strangest stories, from the swamps of the Skunk Ape to the rivers haunted by two-toed Tom, the demon gator. We'll explore how science and folklore intertwine. So follow us once more into the unknown. So Rob, how you doing?
Good. How you doing?
I'm good. So I know with your show on from Coast to Canopy, you explored a lot of coastal ecosystems and ancient forests and stuff like that. How often do you come across stories that sound like it can be the beginning of a cryptid legend?
I don't come across a whole lot of stories that sound like cryptid species, but I go to a lot of places that, you can maybe imagine. The Apalachicola River especially, the floodplain is really extensive, and, every once in a while I find myself in a kayak going back deep as far as we can into Tupelo Swamp. And you can kind of imagine, maybe something could live back there.
Right.
Away from people. But, it's I like to try to imagine maybe a more primeval a setting, that we're as far away as possible from sort of human influence, and maybe there could be something there.
Yeah. Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but they're still discovering new species in the Apalachicola area, like new species of salamanders recently, maybe. So why not other undiscovered beings?
The largest animal probably discovered in the last 100 years in North America was in our area in a steephead ravine on Eglin Air Force Base. And it's a salamander that was about 1 foot or 2 feet long. And then and that's living in a wetland area down at the bottom of a ravine. And they found it in a couple of other places, sort of South Alabama, South Georgia, and so it's a little area right there. But see, most of the species, that's the largest that's been found in the last 100 years. And, whenever you read about new species discoveries, it's really rare. I think they found another vertebrate somewhere in an Indonesian island, and that was another large discovery. But as far as discovering new species, finding something large is kind of rare. A lot of the species I cover that are new species people discover are kind of tiny, like amphipods that live in caves underwater, or a smaller salamander that was described. And that's just because it was confused with other salamanders that looked like it, and they did genetic work and figured out it was a different thing. And so, that's part of it too. It's just it's hard to, people haven't been finding anything new that's large, not in a long time.
I see how these environments are easy to mythologize, because you can go in a Florida swamp or something, and it's no people around, no structures. It's just it can look a little ancient, but I know the air quality of today's world also makes the size of things a lot smaller than it used to be, I guess. But I didn't even know that about the salamander. 1 foot or 2, that's actually pretty big when you think about
It's close to with the Hellbender, which is the famous one in North Carolina, and the cool streams there. Yeah. And they say steephead streams have a lot of similarities with north, not to get into, too much of the flora and fauna, but, steephead ravines tend to be places where things that are like things in North Carolina gathered during the last ice age. Things migrated down.
I just think it's cool that we are still discovering things. There still are new things to be discovered. And so I feel like when it comes to cryptids, maybe there is something that we somehow just hasn't been discovered. Although, to Rob's point, something that large, I've got some reservations on whether that could be a thing.
Yeah. When I was working on finding the first Floridian, so one of my favorite parts of that was going down to the Florida Museum and interviewing a paleontologist, the vertebrate paleontologist at the University of Florida. And Florida, he says, has this really great preserved fossil record because we have so many sinkholes, and sinkholes with the limestone nullifies acids in the water. And when things get buried in mud, we have excellent preservation of fossils. And so we have a lot of large fossils on records as far as things like skunk apes or, maybe serpentine, monsters that lived in lakes and stuff like that. That's just not in the fossil record. There's some cool stuff like a 25-foot marine crocodile that lived on the coasts 5 million years ago. Things like that. As far as more recently, a lot of things went extinct at the end of the Ice Age, a lot of large things.
Yeah. I was going to ask, have you ever seen anything? It kind of sounds like you haven't seen nothing kind of out of the ordinary, but have you seen anything cryptid related?
I haven't seen anything. I think what, a lot of times more is that you might hear things kind of odd, maybe at night.
Yeah.
You're in a place like this and you hear a lot of things, and it might just be squirrels running around or, a possum or, but when you're far from places, I haven't really seen anything. I've heard of a couple things that made me wonder what it might be.
Right.
But maybe I get too logical in my brain. I'm like, well, it's probably it probably sounds worse than it is.
What about you, Regan? Have you ever seen anything out there or heard anything?
I'd like to keep my mind open to the possibilities. I think there's a lot of, as much as Rob is saying, hey, we've got a lot of people who are really researching, looking at our past history through fossils, looking into these spaces. I think there's places we haven't all explored, what's in the deep ocean. Have we really all discovered everything that lives down in the deepest reaches of the sea? So I like to keep my mind open to possibilities, just because I think keeping the possibility of something new and something that we don't even know about yet, I think is fun. It's fun to think that way.
It is.
So when I've been out in the forest, so my family has a big woods that we all camp in together. So I've spent a lot of time in the woods. No, I don't think I've ever actually seen anything that seemed unrecognizable to me. Once in a while, like Rob was saying, I'll hear something really interesting. I think I was at the St. Mark's Wildlife Refuge a year or so ago, and I heard this really weird sound. It sounded like it was echoing sort of all around me, and it was a grunting noise, but lots of grunting noises, all really echoey and kind of spooky and hollow. And it was getting toward dusk, and I was like, "What is that sound?"
Wow,
that's so scary. And I was walking on this path, and I realized it was all coming from above me. And then I looked up, and I think it was cormorants nesting in the trees.
Oh, okay.
And they were all making
crazy.
kind of like a grunting noise. And I looked up later and the a bird reference and found that's a noise that cormorants can make.
Aquatic birds make some really freaky sounds. Yeah. Herons too. All those things just make a little.
And I'm not used to the idea that they would all be roosting in these trees above me. Aquatic birds are in the water, in my mind. But I guess they have to sleep somewhere at night.
Yeah.
So they were all just a huge group of them. I don't know, 40 or more, a ton.
Wow.
We're just all up in these trees making these noises. And it was, even once I realized what it was a little spooky, but it turns out not to have been a cryptid. So.
It's interesting, about the trees. So when I went to, it's a aquatic center place down in, I'm forgetting the area. It's like almost an hour up away from Tallahassee. But there was signs all over the area about monkeys in the trees loose.
Silver Springs,
Yeah.
They shot a Tarzan movie there in the 30s or 40s and were not responsible stewards of the land and did not collect their monkeys from there. So yeah, around Silver Springs, there are definitely a lot of monkeys still around.
Still around. It's kind of scary when you think about it. There's a foreign ape just hanging out in the woods not far from here, you know.
Well, and I think, I mean, that's a little bit of like a spooky story that I think is like real in Florida, right? So there's actually an island in like central Florida. It's like an island in the middle of like a river, and it is where the descendants of the monkeys that were used for smallpox testing now live in Florida, like in our state.
Oh, wow.
And I think they're spider monkeys. I could be wrong, but they're a kind of monkey that doesn't swim. So the water contains them there in that space. But there's something really like scary movie eerie about that idea to me, that there are these monkeys that are descendants from the smallpox like smallpox vaccine testing.
Ain't no telling
that
they
live in our
carrying.
state now. And you all might have heard too about the efforts, I think, in Bainbridge to build a primate testing facility, where they're talking about bringing in hundreds of monkeys to do various testing on, and people are very concerned, talking about what happens, like with Hurricane Michael. We saw Hurricane Michael come far onto shore and really damage a lot of buildings, do a lot of damage to facilities. Could a big hurricane go into Bainbridge, people are wondering, and cause enough damage at this primate testing facility that now all of a sudden you've got monkeys on the loose who have been who knows what, I don't know what kind of testing they're doing there, but your imagination could run wild. And people have also brought in concerns about groundwater. If at this facility there's a lot of fecal matter from these animals, could whatever viruses that they have, whatever things, maybe are, they call it zoological, like can transfer from an animal to a human. Could some of that impact our community through the groundwater? And so people are really concerned about that. And so it's not, again, not a cryptid, but like still a little bit of like a real life spooky situation that we've got in Florida. And
something that will, our imaginations run wild with things like that. Because we've seen those movies like Outbreak or whatever, and it starts with...
That's what I thought about.
Starts with these animals, and a diseased animal, and it transfers to a human, and then, what kind of zombie virus are we going to get from that?
Right? Exactly. I think that's one thing, is that a lot of these, these I'm going to say folklore stories, right? Like a lot of these stories about things that are happening are often based in a nugget of reality, right? So they start with this idea, maybe, this has not happened, but like imagine if the facility in Bainbridge did get damaged by a hurricane and some monkeys did get loose, and maybe years from now people would have developed this story about some new big sort of humanoid-esque cryptid that lives in the forest there because of some kind of crazy testing that it had, and now it's escaped from the hurricane damage. I mean, I think that a lot of these stories started somewhere. And another thing I think is interesting, as long as we're sort of talking about like the basis of folklore and where some of these things come from, I think another thing to talk about is that it's really interesting that I think a lot of them serve as either reflections of like societal anxieties or as like commentaries on our current society. So like this isn't a cryptid, but like a common sort of like folklore story that we like study and talk about is like there's sort of like old wives' tales, but like in a modern way. So a few years ago there was a thing going around about a guy who bought a chicken sandwich from a fast food restaurant, and he bit into it, and it had maybe like a cyst in it, and it like like it was super gross, and and then that like traveled all around. Everybody was like talking about it, and no one was sure like, is that real or is that fake? And it sort of turned into basically like a folklore story. And what it really was sort of like this like commentary that we were having as a society on our like anxieties about becoming increasingly reliant on fast food and about like the dangers that could pose to like the fabric of our society. And so I think it's really interesting to look at how these stories that we're telling ourselves can reflect that. So like with Skunk Ape, which is like a well-known Florida cryptid, I think he's an example of what they call like a humanoid cryptid. So like Bigfoot and Yeti like all fit in those categories, and they often represent sort of like an other. And so I think that we as humans who form groups together often need and want an other, which can often be like a container for these anxieties and worries that we have, maybe a container for blame about what's going wrong in our society, and also a container for just like fascination and the ability to maintain wonder and to maintain like curiosity about our world.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, when you talked about how society kind of gets these things together to make these stories, a disease, for example, back maybe like hundreds thousand years ago, in some tribe, they might acute that to, oh, you cursed. There's a curse out there, but it's really a disease you don't know about.
Right.
And that's how the stories happen. You go over there, you're going to be cursed, but really you're just getting sick from animal feces situation, food crisis, something like that. And that's how these stories are birthed. Well, I guess my question for you, if you've studied folklore at academic level, a tall tale from a legend like Two-Toed Tom, which is a demon gator, or Skunk Ape, like, what's the difference between a tall tale to you and like a mythic legend like Skunk Ape or something?
I mean, I think they're all the same. So folklore is, again, just a way that we can like tell one another stories that help us like understand the world that we're living in. And folklore is so broad. It can be a lot of different things. Folklore can be, in folklore you can study, why certain jokes have become popular, or how people choose to dress. Fashion can be part of folklore, but part of folklore are these stories that we use to tell one another. They're how we relate to one another in our society and how we understand the world we're living in. Yeah. And so I think, certainly at some point, I guess, and I don't know if I'm really qualified to answer this, but like, is the Odyssey folklore? So at one point it was, right, during its current telling, like when that was the current civilization, I think the Odyssey was folklore. I think those stories that they told each other about, the Cyclops there, that was folklore. Now that is so far into our past that I think folklore, the kind of folklore I'm talking about and that I study, is more focused on modern culture. Right. And so I don't know when that like cutoff happens and when something becomes like a part of our history and maybe would be more the purview of like an anthropologist, who studies more like ancient culture versus a folklorist who studies more like modern culture. When does that cutoff happen? I don't really know.
That has been, because it's influenced literature now for thousands of years, and it's been a formative part of our culture. So, I guess at that point it crosses a threshold into something different.
Right.
When you were talking before, something that occurred to me is you're talking about sort of reflecting our modern society. And I think one thing, as someone who covers ecology, and, so I know I seek out places that are remote. And we've lost a lot of habitat. And I think maybe Skunk Ape legends or any legends of cryptids are, we're seeking something that we know we lost as we lose our natural spaces. And we live in this increasingly, anthropogenic world of our structures and our manicured areas, and less of our big wild forests. And maybe that's something too.
Yeah, while I was doing a little bit of research for this, I came across Mothman and read that is an example of a cryptid that represents, again, an anxiety about human impact on our environment.
Right.
And so I think that's a lot about what you were saying, Rob. So I'm not a Mothman expert, so I can't give you all of Mothman's origin story. But my understanding is that part of what happened is that Mothman lived near like some sort of like chemical plant during Cold War times, and so something about that human impact on the environment in that space then caused this cryptid to exist. And so I think again that's in a way an expression about this anxiety about like back to the Bainbridge monkeys, some of the people at these community meetings that we attended to hear about, the discussion about building this facility. People worried about what would this facility's impact have on the environment, and could that then impact the people who are living around it. So I think, those sorts of worries are then reflected in a more creative way in Mothman.
Yeah. And so, these stories from generation to generation, some kind of stay the same, some change a little bit. Like I know, for example, Native Americans, they drew a lot of things that they saw that wasn't discovered yet, like orcas, for example, killer whales. They drew them as like, kind of like demon dolphins. But until the world actually found them, they're meat eaters and everything like that. But it's like, it's not exactly what was depicted per se, all the time, but it exists. So, how you guys feel about how stories are like, I guess, over time change but stay the same with these legends?
Well, I think another example of that same thing is manatees.
Yeah.
Manatees, we love manatees. They're super cool. The story I've heard is that way back when sailors used to be going around in the ocean and they would talk about mermaids. They saw these beautiful woman sea creatures with these long tails, and we believe now that they were talking about mermaids
or dugongs. The saltwater version.
Right. And so I think it's really interesting to think about people who've said that to me have been like, those must have been some lonely sailors, for one thing. Also, like, a lot of what I know about being sort of like a sailor, or I guess maybe like a pirate, a person who spends a lot of time on a boat in the water, comes from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
So, like, was there a lot of rum being consumed?
Right. It could be a lot of
people didn't have a lot
like
of potable
that.
water. I mean, you couldn't keep a lot of fresh water on a boat for a 3-month voyage. I mean, so a lot of people's liquid consumption came in the form of some sort of alcohol. And people used to drink a lot of alcohol during the course of a day just because they didn't have like all the clean water we drink now.
Maybe the manatee does look like a mermaid. And now we represent that sort of culture and history in Florida with like the mermaids at like Weeki Wachee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with manatees too. I mean, those are things that you don't always see a full manatee. You see glimpses. You see
like
the tail come up, and these things that are kind of evocative. And we have this amazing human imagination, and we can turn things into all kinds of fun stories.
Yeah.
So it's just the fleeting glimpses, like those random noises we hear in the woods, or the fleeting glimpse of something moving down, through the trees.
We got a little less than 10 minutes, so I want to ask a few more questions. So which one of the Florida cryptids feel more, I'm just going to say cryptids in general. What cryptid seems more believable, out of like Skunk Ape, Bigfoot, so like Mothman, Jersey Devils, swamp creatures, or serpents? Like, what could really be out there realistically to you guys?
So I would say, and again, I'm not an expert on these cryptids, but, and I don't have a lot of knowledge about this one, but one cryptid that I read about while I was doing some research was Slender Man. And so Slender Man, I read, kind of like reflects our anxieties about social media and technology and the idea that there's sort of like this faceless being that is maybe encouraging people to do harm.
Interesting.
And so is there a slender man, like one single slender man?
Slender men.
No, but is there, could there be in our world with social media and technology sort of faceless people who are urging others to do harm? I think that's definitely true.
There's algorithms doing that.
Right.
Social
Right.
media.
I mean, there was an AI that told a teen to commit suicide as a therapy thing,
Right.
I mean, there are.
So as much as like, I don't know that there's like a single slender man. Like I do feel like I think there's the possibility, that there are forces at play, whether coming from an algorithm or coming from actual beings or humans or whatever, who are using technology in a bad way to cause people to do harm. And again, like I said, please don't write in if I'm misunderstanding Slender Man, but that is my understanding of what I think his mythology is.
What about you, Rob? You think these things can exist realistically?
It's hard for me to think that. I mean, I guess I spend so much time with researchers who are out there looking for things. And then, there's a lot of people who are out there fishing and hunting in the woods. I don't know. I like Regan's idea of the deep ocean. I mean, there was an article that came out last year, like only 1% of it has ever been seen by human eyes.
Wow.
And so, I mean, there could be a lot of things. I mean, for the longest time, people knew giant squids existed, but no one had ever seen one.
Right. Now they're
washing
washing
them
up.
alive. And then finally, finally someone got a submersible to get footage of one alive in the ocean. And a lot of these things are really just more near shore too, within a couple hundred miles. I mean, there's this even deeper ocean that have barely seen. We've seen less of it than we have of outer space, and the moon surface, or
Well, I think so. Out of all these cryptids, I don't think there's a Jersey Devil flying around. I don't think there's a Mothman per se, but I don't know, Skunk Ape, Bigfoot, that always has a little bit of a favoritism for me because, there used to be a creature called Gigantopithecus thousands of years ago that did exist, and there's a fossil record for. And it was a giant ape that walked on 2 feet, and it could possibly be a descendant. You never know. Now, do these forests have enough for them to be sustainable? That's the thing. It's like the fruit and everything, the plants, but are they omnivores? Do they eat meat too? Because I think some apes do eat meat. So I feel like that might be the more realistic out of all the others because it kind of existed before, but just over time, the stories have made it more of a monster in a way, and then a creep than a normal animal that it kind of was before. So that's my theory about the Bigfoot Skunk Ape, because I think it could be out there. I think it's out there, honestly. Just low number, secluded, and smart. I think they're really intelligent. I spoke to Dave Shealy a few weeks ago, the skunk ape expert down in the Everglades, and he had footage that went viral in the early 2000s, and it's like where these things were walking at, where he lives, the grass is like high, and the water with it is high too. There's no human gonna be running through that. It's just snakes, the alligators, it's little stuff like that I think about. It's like, would you really risk your life to put on a suit and run through the mucks of the Everglades just to get a video? I don't think so. But
what about a bear though? Because my understanding is a lot of these sightings of sort of the humanoid skunk ape, yeti, often people later find out, that was a bear.
It's
Bears
possible.
walk on 2 legs.
Bears are interesting. The first time I saw one in the wild, or I was driving. It wasn't in the wild, but outside of a zoo, let's say. I thought it was a big dog. And, I've seen a few now out and about, and I'm always surprised by that their shape is not quite what I would have thought. I saw a larger one that had a bear shape, but some of them are a lot skinnier and have different types of shapes. And I could see where they could be confused for any kind of number of animals just because we think of bears and we think of grizzly bears we've seen in cartoons or something,
Right.
Or we've seen in zoos that are really well fed.
Add some of those spooky noises and a little bit of dusky light and I mean and
bad camera
human
angles.
imagination. I mean, I think that's a great thing about being a human is that we have these big brains and they are so imaginative and we can create so many things with our imagination and part of what we can create are these really fun stories about the world we live in.
Yeah. So here's my last question to both you guys. If you were to see any of these cryptids or a cryptid, would you not only record it, but would you keep it to yourself or would you tell people about it?
It's my job. I mean, I see anything in nature, I want to photograph it.
Yeah.
And it would be hard. Well, if it was something that was really outlandish and that seemed really out of the ordinary, I have people I guess I would try to consult maybe first. And just check. Because that's one thing, too, is I'm just being responsible about what I post as far as animals. I don't want to misidentify anything to begin with. So there are probably people I'd reach out to first, like, what am I seeing here? Am I misunderstanding what I'm seeing here? Is this something maybe that escaped captivity?
Right.
That kind of thing. But always, my instinct is always to record as much as I can, anything I see out and about.
Would you tell people or keep it to yourself?
I think my answer is really similar to Rob's because I'm working under a set of ethical guidelines, right? And one of those most driving forces is truth. Right? I present truth and I present facts because when I am publishing things, I am first and foremost a journalist and I follow these ethical guidelines. Okay. And so I would have to, again, if I saw something really surprising and strange, double check with experts, try to find out. And I would not publish anything until I felt like I had very definite facts. Another guiding principle for journalists is do no harm. And I think that that's something that I would really have to also consider. Let's just imagine I did see a cryptid. And what if I even were able to, with experts, prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt? I'm certain of my facts, and I know as a journalist that this is true. I think I would also have to evaluate on a do no harm level. If I start publishing this, what kind of harm might I do to this animal and to this environment? Yeah. And would that outweigh the benefit that our community would gain from having this information? Right. And so that is something that I would have to weigh as a journalist, and that I wouldn't make that decision alone. I would make that decision with my team here in the news department and with other smart news experts who could help me make those ethical choices.
Right. Researchers would weigh in too, because I mean, anytime we go out in the field to look at something rare or imperiled, I mean, I'm always told, please do not share location information. They're very cautious about that kind of a thing. So likely too, the researchers you'd go out with would really want you to kind of be careful about how you presented it.
How
if you
could
did.
we handle that in an ethical way that would do no harm and also weigh again the benefit to society and our community of finding this information?
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable, respectable answers from experts out there in the field and stuff. But I really appreciate you guys coming in today. Because I was like, I gotta get at least 2 people that really are attached to these things some way, somehow. And you guys were the perfect people to bring in this morning. Rob, Regan, thank you so much. This is, for at least this season, the final episode of Into the Unknown for now, in the Halloween month of October. So, thank you guys for coming in, talking about all this creepy stuff, cryptids, Bigfoot, Skunk Ape, all those cool things. And I can't wait to do this again.
Yeah, thanks, Fred. It's been fun.
Thanks. It's a lot of fun. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. All right.